Okay, so حأحكي both English and Arabic لأنه that's how I feel more comfortable. وبالآخر حنعمل Q&A صغيرة. So if you guys have any questions, you could let me know. If anything doesn't make sense, you could let me know. So this is the productivity accelerator. We're gonna go into a little bit of detail. You're gonna know all the specifics. So the first thing I want you to do is to train your focus. So make sure you don't have any distractions around you, which is part of productivity. The most valuable asset you have as a person كلنا عنا إياها is attention, right? Not just as attention as an attention span, that you can focus. Like advertisers and advertising agencies pay billions every single year to grab your attention. A lot of social media is هلا صايرين كتير fast paced. It's all about creating dopamine boosts to your mind. What that does is that your attention span becomes very small. It becomes super hard for you to focus. So a big part of developing productivity is actually training your focus through periods of just desensitizing yourself to dopamine, meaning going through periods of time without having to get another dopamine hit. And for most of us, it's an addiction. Dopamine is an addiction. For those of you who don't know, dopamine is a hormone in the brain that creates temporary happiness, feelings of good feelings. And they usually aren't as long lasting as some other hormones like serotonin. So this is what it does. A lot of advertisements, a lot of the content of the 21st century, especially with TikTok or Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts, they're all catering towards creating dopamine in your mind. Okay. And what that does is that eventually we become addicted to it. A lot of us don't have the ability to focus for long periods of time, which is why if you're able to develop focus for a long period of time through practice, what happens is that you have a very valuable asset that gives you a slight edge over a lot of people, right? Because now you're able to focus, now you're able to produce high quality work in a lower amount of time. And that gives you a very strong advantage over your competitors. Let's say if eventually you decide to get a job, a slight edge over your colleagues, or if you start a business, you'll be able to have a slight edge over your competitors because you have that ability to just sit down, focus, and get into a flow state. All right, so make sure your phones are turned off. If you're watching this on your phones, make sure you turn the notifications off so that you train your focus, and always get into the habit of training your focus whenever you can. A big thing that I do is meditation, because it's really the most boring thing you can do in the world until you get to certain levels. But in the beginning, it's very boring, and just getting used to sitting with the boredom instead of really wanting to, get the next hit of dopamine is going to make you a very powerful individual that is very productive. Okay, so that's step number one. Here's what we'll cover today. We're going to cover the 3 macros of high performance. Those are pretty much the things that I use with my own clients to make sure that they become high performers. They're performing at the top level. Performing meaning super productive. And those are usually multi-6-figure entrepreneurs, 7-figure entrepreneurs. They make millions a year, and they need to have that high performance, that high level of productivity in order to, keep scaling and keep building their businesses to the next level. And you could take those same concepts and apply them to your schoolwork, to your business. If you're working on any projects as well on the side hustles, let's say, you could do that as well, and start producing high quality work. We're going to talk about creating unlimited motivation, because I know from myself, I know from a lot of you, just being able to consistently be high performing, consistently be motivated, wake up every single day and produce high quality work and get shit done. It's very hard for most of us. So we want to learn how to create unlimited motivation, and we're going to talk about how you're going to do that. There's a few steps that you're going to learn so that you do that. All right, and then finally we want to put things together. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to share with you some things to put everything together into a practical plan that after this training, you will be able to use it and pretty much become productive from today. Okay, so those are a little bit of what we're going to cover. Before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit about me. I want you all to be skeptical. Okay, so مشكل حدا that seems like they know what they're talking about actually knows what they're talking about. There's a lot of people that don't know what they're talking about. That could be me as well. So I want to give you a little idea about why I'm qualified to help you with this. So you know that what you're learning is something that actually works, has been tested time and time again. So we're going to go a little bit into a before and an after, and you're just going to be able to know who the fuck I am. So I'm going to talk a little bit about 2014, 2017. I was addicted to video games. بلشنا Call of Duty, Battlefield, and then by the end, like 2017, I was addicted to League of Legends, 14 hours a day. The only reason I would get good marks at school, I was still in school back then, was because I used to manipulate some of the teachers to give me high marks, which was a dick move, because I just really was able to focus in class. So that was one thing. But I was addicted to video games. It really hurt my social life, my personal life, my productivity. I wasn't studying. I would procrastinate a lot, typical teenager that was addicted to video games. And I had a shit attention span. It was shit. I couldn't focus for like 5 minutes. I used to struggle with social anxiety a lot. So if I wanted to talk to somebody, if let's say I was at McDonald's and I wanted to order like an extra ketchup, I would start fucking shaking. It was a shit show. I really like didn't perform well socially. I would get nervous. Even with close people, I just couldn't speak my mind. I was also a procrastinator. So I would put off everything like my work to the last second. For example, I did the SATs a few years ago and I literally forgot when the date that I'm going to do the SATs are. And then the only time I studied was at 12 a.m. the night before, and I stayed awake till the next day. So I used to procrastinate a lot. It was a very unhealthy habit, stressed me out a lot because I had to put a lot of pressure on myself to do something. What was happening is that I would procrastinate, pressure would start to build up until it got to a point where it was no longer bearable. So I took action. And that's not what you want to be. That's not the quality of a high performer that is able to really like show up and dominate the day and really make sure that they produce high quality work. So I procrastinated a lot, and then I was always stressed out to the max because I procrastinated and I had anxiety and I was addicted to video games. And so what that did is that I became super stressed. So sort of in the middle of the night, and I would be shaking, I would be sweating, sometimes I'd spit blood, and I thought there was like a disease going on, and the doctor just said it was because of a lot of stress. What video games did is that they produced a lot of hormones, a lot of adrenaline inside of me, and my body temperature would increase. I would have no like release, and all what that did was make me super stressed. So that was how I was, right? And what I've been doing through the past years is just working on myself to get to a point where I'm able to coach this. So I'm helping people with the same thing I struggled with, just in a different degree. So let's talk a little bit about now. From 2017 to present day, I've been working relentlessly on myself, went from procrastinating to high performing. I own a multi-six-figure business where we're helping other coaches build their own businesses as well. I built 2 coaching businesses before this. One was helping people with social anxiety because I struggled with this. And the other was high performance coaching, which is partially what we're talking about here. Rashid was a partner in one of the businesses. Nizar too, he's here. You guys are fucking amazing. I love you. So they helped me a lot with both of those. Now each of them has gone their own ways. They're building their own projects, which I'm super happy for them, really proud. But I went from a video game addict to a multi-six-figure business owner, which is insane, in honestly a year and something, right? So it's possible. I'm about to travel the world doing what I love, giving seminars, giving retreats, and just doing something that I truly love. I'm going to be traveling to Bali in 1 week, waiting for my visa because, Lebanon. And I've been able to do all that through being a productive person. That was the one habit that helped me get here. I'm emotionally and spiritually healthy because I'm able to manage my time really effectively. I'm able to make sure that I release emotions as they come up. And I'm not saying this to brag and, oh, look at me, I'm so fucking amazing. But like, the reason I'm saying this is because I'm just showing you that I was a fucking shit show just a few years ago that had nothing going on in his life. And then in a matter of years of being productive and being relentless, you're able to change your whole life around. I never thought in a million years that in this very short amount of time, I'd be able to go from procrastinating to coaching people in the same thing I struggled with and making a shit ton of money with it, that I'm able to travel the world, take time when I need to, go out whenever I want, work on my own terms, and just be able to make an actual impact in the world, be able to watch people transform in front of my eyes due to the value that I'm providing them, right? And I'm happy to have opportunities like these to help other people that I was in the same position as a few years ago. So the reason I say this is to show you that through productivity, through building relentless consistency, you're able to transform your whole life in a matter of years. You just have to be consistent enough. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. There's no secret formula. There's nothing like, I'm not special. In fact, I think that if I can do it, anybody can. But it's just like being super fucking productive. If you're able to land that down, if you're able to be consistent, relentless, high performing, you're going to achieve your goals. There's no doubt about that. There's really no doubt about that. Okay. And one thing that I want you to know is I'm still nowhere near where I want to be. I have extremely big goals and it's always a work in progress. So I don't want you to think, oh, look, this guy has it all figured out. I don't. I still have, emotional breakdowns. I still have my bad days. I still feel like shit sometimes. I still feel a lot of doubt, insecurity, all of that stuff. But it's all part of the process, right? It's not something that, you're supposed to seek perfection. I used to be like, oh, fuck, this isn't supposed to happen. I should always be like on my A game. But no, there are days where I wake up and I'm not productive and I sit down and I binge watch Vikings, Peaky Blinders or whatever, like the whole day. And that's okay. I have the ability to do that. It's rejuvenating, it's refreshing. So you also don't want to go too hard on yourself. Okay. With that being said, let's get into the bread and butter of it. I know I like to talk a lot, but let's talk about the 3 macros of high performance. Before we get started with this, if you guys have any questions, make sure you note them down. We'll get, to them. You'll have as much time to ask any questions you need. If anything is confusing, doesn't make sense, or if you just have any questions. So the 3 macros of high performance are productivity, psychology, and physiology. And that creates the Trinity effect. And I'm going to go into a little bit of detail. Productivity is pretty much time management, consistency, managing your energy, managing your time, routines, habits, tasks, reverse engineering your vision down to small tasks, and creating daily routines that will allow you to get to that vision. But that's not enough, because you also need to be psychologically healthy, where the psychology macro comes in, which means emotional resiliency, emotional intelligence, mental intelligence, being able to process your thoughts, being able to disidentify with your thoughts and be able to observe them without really identifying with them a lot and allowing them to have an emotional impact on you. Okay, so that's the psychology. And then we have physiology. Physiology is pretty much more physiological, meaning your workouts, your nutrition, your sleep habits. There's a lot of things involved in physiology, like chronotypes, like circadian rhythms. I know that all of those names sound complex to some of you, but they're pretty much ways to optimize your physiology so that when you wake up every single day, you're not groggy and feeling like you want to go back to sleep or you want to murder somebody in the first 2 hours that you're awake. You actually feel rejuvenated. We're not going to get into psychology and physiology today because they usually take a lot of time and they're specific to each individual, because they're things that are involved in DNA, or we need to study your psychological makeup to create changes, and that usually can't happen over one call. So what we're going to talk about is productivity, because this is something straightforward, something that's very practical and can stand on its own, and you guys could start applying it from today. And I'll give you access to a lot of things in the end that are very practical to just get to it very, very fast. So let's get into it. Let's talk about creating unlimited motivation. Okay, so how do you create unlimited motivation? How do you get yourself to wake up every single day and just feel motivated? Feel like, okay, I'm actually ready to put in some work. We're going to talk about that. So we all struggle with this consistency, right? I bet each and every single one of us has procrastinated at some point, has set a deadline for something and wasn't able to complete it, or we're just not as consistent. I don't know what you guys are working on in terms of projects. I know some of you are building their side hustles and their businesses, which I'm super fucking happy about. Others are just working on their school projects. Others are freelancing, but we all struggle with consistency, right? We all do. And so how do you create that consistency, because if you're able to land that one thing, your life is going to change. Okay, so how do you create unlimited motivation? Step one, this is very cliche, super freaking cliche. You've heard it a million times, I bet, but you got to start with your why, right? For me, I realized that the reason I wasn't productive at school is because school just wasn't made for me. I came to Lebanon ب 2018 2018, and I went to university, did my freshman year. I got, great marks. It was easy, but I realized that I was never studying. I was always like trolling the teachers, creating shitty presentations just to see their reactions. Ooh, I realized that the reason I wasn't really performing well is because it was just not for me. There was no reason behind my actions. So the first thing I usually do with all of my clients is to really build a strong why. And I'm not talking about why, like, oh, sit down, and then, just write your why. It needs to be something that you're emotionally invested in. When there's emotions involved, you really like start changing. You really start like having a reason to do what you do. We need a reason, right? You need to think of your psychological makeup, and you need to realize that your brain was made to take the path of least resistance, right? Your brain just likes taking the path of least resistance. If I sit down and I'm like, okay, brain, what do you want to do? Do you want to put 2 hours of intense work that's gonna like eventually help you in the long term, or do you want to sit down and watch Netflix that's going to give you pleasure and dopamine in the short term? The brain wants the path of least resistance. That's your reptilian brain, right? It doesn't care about your goals. It doesn't give a shit about where you want to be, right? Just wants to take the path of least resistance. So unless you have a very strong reason to give your brain so that it's like, oh, okay, listen, man, this is a good reason, let's go with the hard thing, it's going to pick the easy thing, right? It's logical. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just how the brain works. It's made to make your life easy, right? And that's going to give you short-term pleasure, but in the long term, you're going to sacrifice your goals. And that's why very few people are able to, hit their goals, because most people can't conquer their brain. Their brain actually has control over them, and so they have no control over it. Shoo ma on their brain, they're going to go with it. They're like bitches for their brain, right? And so that's something you need to realize. You need to start becoming aware of your brain's thought patterns or your own thought patterns, and realize that, there are two ways you could overcome it. You could overcome it with sheer discipline, which I use. I build discipline every single day. And that's through like meditation, that's through doing something that's hard, something that makes me fearful. That's one. And two is starting with your why, finding a reason, right? Is that I didn't have a reason to hop on this call, I wouldn't, but I really love what I do. I really, really like, I sat down and I thought about what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Like, I was like, okay, what would I do for free? Is that there was no money, there was no currency. I was never able to make money from one thing, but I had to pick a job. What would it be? And it's this. And right now, that's why, like, I've only had one sip of my coffee. It's about to turn cold, but it's because I love talking, right? I don't want to stop it. It's giving me energy, right? And so that's something you guys need to notice. So that's something very, very important. Okay, start with your why. Sit down and really think about the reason why you're doing something. If there's no good reason, maybe it's not for you. That's why I dropped out of university when I did. And I'm not telling you guys to drop out of university, of course. I mean, unless you want to, unless you feel like that's the right decision. And for me, it was. I realized that I had no reason to stay there. I had bigger goals. I had a reason to do this. So I took that decision. And a lot of people were against it. A lot of people didn't like it. But once you start succeeding with it, they'll start supporting you. So don't give a fuck about it. Really sit down, identify what your vision is, build a why, and then that's going to help you build a lot of motivation. Okay, so that's something super duper important. Let me open the chat for a little bit. Nizar says also creating the opposite of your why. For example, if I don't work on this right now, I'm going to stay mediocre for the rest of my life. 100%. Thank you, Nizar, for sharing this. So what he's saying is you also need to create consequences. So what's the consequence of not doing this thing? So let's say you have a project. Okay, what's the consequence of not doing this thing? Pretty much you're playing on your psychology. You want to build as much pleasure towards doing something and as much pain towards not doing something. So why is not doing this so painful? Why is me not, like, what are the consequences of me not getting this work done? And then what is going to happen? Why am I doing this? And so you'll have a lot of pleasure towards doing something and a lot of pain towards not doing something. And that's going to prime your psychology to take action. Okay. So make sure you find your why. Thank you, Nizad, for sharing this, by the way. Fucking amazing. Okay, so that's step number one. Step number two, don't rely on motivation as your primary driver of action. Because guess what? Motivation is not consistent, right? And you want to be consistent. So when you are motivated, fucking amazing. Fucking amazing. When I get motivated, when I get inspired, I produce the highest quality of work. But the thing is, you can't control when you're motivated. It's something that happens. And the more you are on your purpose, right, the more you're going to be motivated, the more that you're going to be inspired. So that's a good sign that you're on your purpose. But with that being said, motivation is not consistent. You know, you might wake up some days and you might just not be motivated. So how do you deal with that? Well, don't rely on motivation as your primary driver of action. There are two ways, two paradigms that we can look at this. We don't want to rely on motivation. What's better than motivation? Well, discipline. But discipline is fucking hard, right? It's not easy. But if you manage to build discipline, you're going to really like crush your competition. You're going to be fucking unstoppable, man. That is going to be freaking amazing, right? But it's not easy to build. Discipline is really hard to build. For example, I'm working on my discipline this year. One of my challenges is that I literally haven't taken a hot shower once. Not one hot shower, never. It was super, like I would jump in the shower, I would put on some Viking music just to pump myself up, turn the water to cold, open it up, and I'd be freaking anxious, I'd be shaking. And I jump under the water and I shower, stay under it for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I'd get so freaking cold. But what that does is that over time, it teaches your brain to become your bitch. That's pretty much it. You no longer fall victim to your brain. Now you have total control over your brain, right? And so that's really what happens, is that you should always be finding ways to do something hard every single day. So now, the way I want you to think about it is that you want to reframe your relationship with fear. A lot of us, when we face fear, we contract. We're like, oh, I'm afraid of this. Let me not do it, right? And that keeps you in your comfort zone. The best way to build discipline is to prime your mind and make it a habit to take actions that are hard. So let's say I'm anxious to do something. I'm going to fucking do it just to show my brain who's boss. Because if you allow your brain to control you, you're always going to be mediocre. You're always going to be average. If you want to be average, that's totally cool. I'm guessing a lot of you like on this call don't want to. That's why you dedicated like 1 hour of your time, whatever it is, to join this meeting and learn some things. And so if you really want to take this seriously, challenge yourself every single day. Do things that you're afraid to do. Do things that are uncomfortable, right? Because whatever your goal is, like for example, my goals, it was so freaking uncomfortable. The emotional breakdowns that I have, the doubt that I went through, the fears that I went through, the insecurities, it was hard. And unless you teach yourself how to be disciplined and how to really control your brain and not allow it to deceive you and not allow it to make excuses, you're going to fail, right? And so a big part of it is building discipline. A big part of it is challenging yourself every single day. A big part of it is showing your mind who's boss, right? That's the most important thing. Show your mind that you're in control. And it's hard in the beginning, right? When I started meditating, I would meditate for 5 minutes. I'm like, oh, is it 5 minutes yet? Is it 5 minutes yet? That's what I would do. Now I meditate for 2 hours a day. So we all start somewhere, right? And that's totally cool. Just make sure you challenge yourself and improve yourself 1% every single day. And that's why I want you to pick some things that you're afraid of doing. So sit down and be like, what are the things that I'm super freaking afraid of doing? The things that I've been avoiding. And go ahead and do those. And do those again and again and again and again and again until your brain becomes accustomed to you facing your fears, until your comfort zone becomes going out of your comfort zone, right? You want to seek discomfort. That's what's super important. And that's going to build discipline. Now, when you see fear, you're like, yes, it's time for me to take action. You're like, yes, this is what I need to do. Fear is a symbol that you're going in the right direction, that you're pushing your comfort zone and that you're playing at your limits. If you want to stay in your comfort zone, by all means, stay in it, watch Netflix all day, be comfortable, sit on your couch, do nothing. That's totally cool. If you really want to hit your goals, then you're going to need to be going through discomfort, right? And that's going to allow you to build discipline. That's paradigm number one. Paradigm number two is really disidentifying with your mind, to the point where your mind really has no control over you because you just watch it. Right. And this is a very complex topic. I'm not going to go into a lot of it. It's very spiritual, very esoteric. A lot of you might not really resonate with it. So we're not going to go into it now, but I want to touch lightly on it, where I want you guys to know that you are not your mind. You are the observer of your mind. And the more you practice observing your mind on a daily basis, the more you practice observing your thought patterns or your emotions, the more you disidentify from them, the more you realize that I'm the observer, I'm not the mind, I'm not the thoughts, I'm not the insecurities, I'm not the doubts. You watch them all, the emotional charge decreases and you no longer identify with them, meaning you're able to take action regardless. Action becomes effortless. That's not something you achieve in a matter of months, in a matter of years, even. I still haven't gotten to that point. I just have had glimpses of it. And it's amazing. So if you guys want to go a little bit deeper into it, just start observing your mind, start engaging in forms of meditation. Do your own research. If you're interested in it, you could just DM me if you want to, and I'll share some more information about it. But this is not the point here. So that was step number 2. Hope that was, mildly helpful. Step number 3, you want to develop emotional intelligence and resiliency. If I were to tell you guys the one thing that really hurts me, the one thing that really brings me off my grind, the one thing that really, really, really makes me unproductive, it's when I get too emotional. Either, let's say, with entrepreneurship, especially what me and Rashid, وحتى Nizar, we were just starting out. وما كان عندنا كتير clients. This is a fun story. So when I would have a call with somebody, and I'm like, okay, this is going to cost you $2,000. And they're like, okay, cool, let's freaking do this. So we didn't make a lot of money back then. So suddenly, like, we got super freaking excited. And then the client would ghost us. They would really just stop replying. And we would get fucking depressed. We would really get so freaking depressed that sometimes I would go 1 week, 2 weeks without taking any action. Right. And yeah, we were needy. We were so freaking needy. And so it was my lack of emotional resiliency. And of course, in the beginning, you're not going to be emotionally resilient. The more you have skin in the game, whether you own a business or whatever you're doing, in the beginning, you're going to be an amateur. A lot of things are going to throw you off your balance. A lot of things are going to get you off your focus. كنت نزل post, let's say, on Facebook, and some guy that's a little bit better than me would leave a negative comment. And I get so fucking emotional, man. So freaking emotional that I would really get sad. I wouldn't sleep at night, right? I would just stay there and think about it, like, how could I have avoided this? And that emotional immaturity inside of me, which I don't judge, it was part of the process, that really got me off my grind, that really hurt my results. And I would go weeks, sometimes months, without taking action because I wasn't emotionally intelligent and I wasn't emotionally resilient. I identified too much with my thoughts. I cared too much what people thought about me. I just didn't have a process to release my emotions and to really like be emotionally resilient and just go through bullshit without identifying with it. So you want to learn how to develop emotional intelligence and resiliency. Once again, how? Well, spiritual concepts and understanding how your mind works. You are not your mind. You might be expecting something more practical. There isn't something more practical. This is just done through practice periods over and over again until you become emotionally resilient. It's all about just going through your fears. Once again, the same thing as step number 2, going through your fears, and that will just make you desensitize. But تمسحه pretty much. That's part of it. تمسحه, and then the other part is learning how to process your emotions through bodily awareness, seeing where the tension is in your body and just focusing on it, giving it enough attention so that it could be released. Sometimes you're going to cry, sometimes you're going to shake, but just learning how to process those emotions is very, very key. And if there's one thing that I would say takes even the best entrepreneurs off of their A game and makes them lag behind and be inconsistent, it's this lack of emotional resiliency. And the more you learn how to control your emotions, the more you learn how to respond rather than react to people, the higher performer you're going to be. Okay, that's super freaking key.